Well, first off, hope you guys are having a good Halloween if you're living in a part of the world that celebrates Halloween. We have many subscribers who actually don't celebrate Halloween.
So happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday to you. This morning we actually lost a legendary actor. He passed away at 90 years old, Sean Connery. And according to reports, he passed away in the Bahamas? And
Yeah.
he was able to die peacefully in his sleep. He was suffering from certain illnesses that I don't think were completely disclosed, at least at the time of
Not yet.
recording this little video we want to do. But Sean Connery's passing actually hit me a little bit harder than I realized, and then as I was reflecting on this, it was really hitting me that there were movies of his that were such a big part of my childhood in particular, as I'm sure many of you guys, right? And I kind of want to just talk a little bit about him, remember Sean Connery's legacy a bit, because growing up with my family, both my mom and dad, especially with my dad, the one thing that I could always have a solid rapport with them on was movies. And, there were several Sean Connery movies that I know were either on the background all the time or that Sean Connery was just constantly being quoted for, so my dad, funny enough, his last live action movie that Sean Connery ever did was League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I remember he did some voiceover work afterwards. But for League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, my dad constantly, I don't even know if this is the right quote, but I remember in the trailer, and it was a movie we did own. I personally had, I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. What he would always just go, "I'm waiting to be impressed." Just something my dad would always say. "I'm waiting to be impressed," and I think that's the line that Alan Quartermain does say. It's a line
in the trailer, at least.
It's
I
definitely
can hear
in
it
the
now
trailer.
in my head.
I know the scene. And then, of course, I think most people will probably immediately associate his work of 007, James Bond. Mm-hmm. And while that's such an influential and important role, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have the longest running franchise in movie history.
Yeah.
And he's always the standard that people are constantly, every Bond has to be compared to, right?
Yeah. Well, and from what I understand, where he was when he passed was where they shot much of, I think, Thunderball or something like that. So, he even...
interesting.
Yeah, was in a place that he would have spent a lot of time making one of those Bond movies. So maybe, during that shoot, he just fell in love with the area or something. Because, those films always have a beautiful locale.
That's crazy. And then some other movies that I really grew up on, because Bond wasn't really one of them. Dr. No, we watched a lot. My dad had a laser disc of Dr. No, so we watched a lot of Dr. No. And then later on in my life, I would eventually watch some of the other ones he did, but the ones that really hit me the most were the ones that I actually shared with my parents. And Untouchables was one of them. His role as Jim Malone. And okay, I'm not gonna quote it, some of the lines that he says in the movie, but my dad was the Italian one, so there were certain lines that, if you guys have seen the Untouchables, that he says to a certain Italian character that my dad just loved to quote. I constantly, in certain edits, I'll throw in this moment of Sean Connery from Dragonheart just saying, "I am the last one."
Dragon.
Yeah, I am the last one. Yeah, and so Dragonheart was a movie I really watched a ton. And my mom also, she would have The Hunt for Red October on playing constantly. And that's still a movie that I think is, always on basic cable. And
I just watched it again, a month ago because
I remember
it
you
was
telling me
on.
that, yeah.
Yeah, and actually, funny enough, likewise, is Dragonheart and Hunt for Red October were two that I grew up on, watched again recently, and grew new appreciations for, as well as Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, because that was one for me that I know as growing up I would have phases where I would play certain tapes over and over again, and that one definitely was one because he's like America's grandpa in that movie.
Yeah, he's incredible in that film.
Junior.
He's amazing. Yeah, he's amazing. He has one of the most iconic voices of any actor to have ever existed too. Like a Sean Connery impression is kind of up there with people who do like Christopher Walken and all that.
I've come from Spain.
I mean, Highlander, my mom was obsessed with the Highlander series too. So I watched a lot of, specifically Highlander 1 and 2, and I think those are the only two. If I'm not mistaken, I think he played Ramirez in that. And yeah, Highlander was one I love watching him in. The Rock, which is, you know, touted as Michael Bay's one good movie.
Like, in the Criterion Collection.
Like this solid good movie. And The Rock, I watched with my dad, I think 2 or 3, and my dad and my brother 2 or 3 times in the theater. And I don't keep bringing up my family, but that's just to show you, like, wow, there really was a childhood association that I had with his films. Another one was where he played King Arthur in First Night. My mom would let this movie play a lot, which I shouldn't have watched when I was younger, but we watched it a lot. You know, was Rising Sun with him and Wesley Snipes, and he's wonderful in the movie. And I think the thing with Sean Connery, I remember I wish I pulled up the quote before recording this, obviously, was he said something about how when it comes to his profession as an actor, he knows that he just has a job to do. And then when he shows up on set, he just gives it, I'm like paraphrasing it, but there's this quote that always stuck to me about his work ethic. And I think it really does show in any movie that he ever did, was that even if the movie wasn't that great, he always gave it 100%. I can't think of a time where I saw something where he was phoning it in.
Yeah.
He took it with the utmost, like, as serious as he could, and he committed full-heartedly to every performance that he ever gave. He just always gave it his best.
Yeah.
And that's something about why I think his legacy is just so long-lasting and why he was able to do movies for so many decades. And I know people wanted him to come out of retirement for so long, but there's something kind of bittersweet about his passing because of the fact that he did retire. You know, he did get spend a lot of his last years not just working. He got to enjoy a lot of his life, from my understanding, at least. You know, that's what's been reported. That's what's been talked about. And as much as people have tried pulling him out of retirement, he wouldn't. You know.
Well, and the funny thing to me is, like, the things he did do after retiring from on-screen work, and as memeable as something like Sir Billy is, like, I appreciate it. I heard a little interview or a bloib about that said he just wanted to do that because it was like a Scottish animation company that was trying to get off the ground, and so it was, even though that movie isn't well renowned, it was like, oh yeah, you know, in the later years, you know, he probably would have just done little things for passion's sake or for the sake of helping out people around. And you look at the scope of his career, and it's like he'll have some of these iconic roles that are so widespread and well known, like a James Bond, and then you'll see him in certain things like The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen or whatever that have their meme qualities. But then also too, like, one of my favorite Sean Connery joints that kind of blew my mind back when I first saw it at like a Revival House cinema was Zardoz, which is like this completely surreal. He's running around in like a thong half the time with like a gun belt on, and they're floating heads, and like
that was another one my dad loved to put on.
That's a great movie to put on.
It was a strange movie.
Put on an album and put on Zardoz and have yourself a mood night. But yeah, it seemed like over the breadth of his career, he did a little bit of everything, and no matter what kind of viewer you are, there's probably something in him, in his catalog, that can, you know, reach to you. And I also appreciate that, as much as it is kind of a meme, that he's always Sean Connery for the most part in voice, even when he's like a Russian submarine commander or a man from Spain. Like, there's something about him and his personality and his charisma on screen that transcends those things and just kind of feels right, even if, you know, there are things you can pick at them for. So yeah, like, he is a unique, like, he's always been there in my life, and it's kind of surreal. He's one of those people I never imagined would die.
I mean, he's played a lot of tough guys and such, but even and I think his work in Indiana Jones is one of his most iconic roles. And you know, it's a character who gets tougher, but when he starts off, he's kind of cowardly. You know, he's scared easily, and he feels really much like a father in that movie. So I feel like he did have range that might have been a bit underappreciated.
Definitely.
Because he is usually associated as just a tough guy.
Tough debonair.
But yeah, guys, I mean, just for someone of his legacy, put down in the comments, you know, what are movies that really stood out to you. Movies of his that you watched growing up a lot. Entrapment was one constantly too.
Watched that on an airplane.
I think that was one of the like earliest DVDs we ever owned. Was Entrapment. You know?
And I remember that movie at the time was like the height of like hot espionage action.
May he rest in
Yeah,
peace.
man. Rest in peace, Sean Connery.
Prayers to his loved ones. And yeah, celebrate his legacy. Watch a Sean Connery movie sometime. He really was a legend in this field.